Well, one of the things that doesn't really surprise me a great deal is that these two individuals had traveled to the Philippines, and one would speculate it was to the Mindanao areas of the Philippines, which is a high risk location, very Muslim occupied, but has certainly the base of operations for a number of Islamic extremist groups, which have been involved in a number of actions, terrorist attacks, domestically, not only against just the members of the general public, but historically against foreigners who have traveled into the country. And unlike Afghanistan or even Indonesia, where there are slightly better and bigger resourced capabilities, the Mindanao region is less easy to intrude on by government forces, and as such provides somewhat of a safe haven for terrorist sympathizers and potentially those wishing to learn terrorist tradecraft. Where terrorist groups operate, whether that be BIF, whether that be Islamic State in Southeast Asia, whether it be Abu Sayyaf, who are the three most predominant terrorist groups operating out of this region, is the fact that you have a diversity of environments to operate within. You have jungles, you have cities, and in many cases, some of that training is in the practical sense, working with smaller cell groups. And one of the advantages of them being able to train there is that they are operating in smaller cell groups rather than as one larger group, which would be easier to detect. Well, since 2019, and certainly since many of the more stringent and robust counterterrorism laws were introduced into the Philippines, this has made it much more difficult for terrorist groups to necessarily provide or facilitate training for foreigners coming into the country. Although there is a long history of foreigners coming over to fight in certain actions and implement certain terrorist attacks in the Philippines. But certainly COVID created somewhat of a chokehold on those foreigners visiting, especially those that were coming from Australia, because Australia introduced very, very stringent lockdown protocols and travel protocols to ensure that its own personal safety during that particular period. But where we've seen certainly many terrorists that will be trained from there, they will be operating in smaller groups, not in large, spectacular actions as we've seen elsewhere around the world, which plays very, very much into what we saw with the Akram family. You had two individuals within a singular family that operated in conjunction and together to carry out these attacks, but carrying them out in the name of Islamic State, as was subsequently confirmed by the two flags found in their vehicle after the attack was obviously controlled and neutralized. We've already seen a step up by Australian counterterrorism and intelligence agencies since the Bondi Beach attack, with most notably today the interception of individuals some 40 kilometers from Bondi Beach who were believed to be involved in a potential terrorist plot. But again, we're going to see even greater controls wherever they can be introduced for any Australians traveling over to the Philippines. Now, that will be incredibly difficult because the Philippines does rely on tourism and does rely on native Australians, as they do going to Bali and parts of Indonesia, to traveling into the Philippines. But there will be a closer watch, no doubt, on key individuals. And although the watch list within Australia is relatively small when you compare it to the 45,000 plus that we have here in the United Kingdom, they do have the capability and resource, being part of the Five Eyes partners, to be able to monitor who may be a person of interest that could be deemed important when it comes to a potential terrorist risk.